Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast. Our primary objective is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never quit. The reality of life is simple. We all fall. We all fail. At times, we get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? Are we stronger? Are we better prepared to attain the maximum of our potential? Thank you for joining our No Quit tribe. As you go for your greatness today, never quit. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. Welcome to episode number 253 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is encouragement. Our quote of the day comes to us from Catherine Pulsiver. Helping others, encouraging others, are often acts of being kind that have more meaning than you may realize. As we're dealing with challenging times throughout the world right now, I'm excited to bring you today's episode. Initially, I was first introduced to our guest while watching him on the show The Sopranos. Fast forward a few years down the road to the very first time that I spoke with Matthew Del Negro, and we found out that we had way more in common than we originally thought. I absolutely love what he is doing to encourage others. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Matt, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Thank you, man. Really nice to be here, and sounds like we have some connections that we didn't even know about.
Definitely. So, first question I ask is, are you ready to positively impact at least one person today?
At least one, yes.
So the number one objective of our show is to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up. And I was curious if you have either a no-quit story of your own or perhaps a really challenging time where you could have given up or given in, but you didn't, and you kept on going.
Well, that's a funny question. That's like a softball you're lobbing me, because I don't know if you knew this, but I have a book coming out this year called 10,000 No's, which is the same name as my podcast, which is kind of all of my stories of being just hammered down by my business as an actor, and also now kind of backed up with all of the stories of so many guests that I've had on the podcast that tell me about how they've gotten to where they are, and the adversity they've had to go through, the rejections they've had to go through. And I just want to do a little shout out, because I think our connection here originally for this interview was John Gordon. And John Gordon is the guy who, he was a guest. I did not know who he was beforehand. One of my old teammates at Boston College I played lacrosse with told me, there's this guy, John Gordon. He played lacrosse at Cornell. His old teammate works with me in finance in San Francisco. He's my favorite author. He's written this book, The Energy Bus. You should definitely interview him for your podcast. We connected. And John is the one that led to my book deal with his publisher. And John's whole thing that he spoke about, sorry, that's my dog back there. John's whole thing that he spoke about when I interviewed him was, he went on his original book tour, and he said, if I can just connect with one person, and he would go on these book signings, and there'd be like 5 people in the Midwest, like nobody there. He said it was terrible, and it was coming out of his own pocket. He's like, if just one person can connect, and the guy that connected with his writing turned out to be, I'm forgetting now who it was someone huge in the college sports world. He took him in, and then it was his career just took off from there, not overnight, but
I believe I could be wrong, but yeah, no, John was actually a guest on our show as well, and I believe it was Dabo Sweeney, the head coach of Clemson, that really took.
Oh,
John.
Was it Dabo?
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was Dabo. That was that original one. Yeah, I knew he was tight.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure if he was the original one, but I know that Dabo, because he's had obviously some amazing success just the last 10 years alone at Clemson, but John has done some amazing things.
Yeah, he's a pretty incredible guy, and just, super generous. What he did for me with his publishers after seeing this little sample of my writing was amazing, and he really walks the walk. And that's an inspiration to me, because I'll sometimes, with an interview like this or with my own podcast, I go, if I get one email from that episode, great, and a lot of times many more will come in, but it's like, if one person somewhere in the world gets changed, then you don't know what the ripple effect will be.
It's interesting you referenced John, because John is actually the reason why you and I connected, because you were on one of his positivity summits last year, and I shot you an email and you responded, and John has become not only mentor of mine, but a good buddy. And I'm not sure if you've read The Coffee Bean, which he co-wrote with Damon West, but Damon's become a good friend of mine as well. And I think the whole concept and what you just hit on is so important, is that one person and impacting that one person. And based on kind of where we are today in the country dealing with this coronavirus, a follow-up question I have to you is what are you doing on a daily basis to, stay positive, stay active, but also stay connected with family and friends?
I just showed my wife my schedule for today, and I know this is an audio only, but this is my calendar today. I feel like I am so busy with, I'm putting the energy into my podcast. I'm putting the energy I'm creating something that's an offshoot of the podcast that's going to be more, even more specific to people that are listeners, that will help them. I'm helping with my kids. I'm doing more on social media. I actually feel like, I was working on a show in New York. We were in episode 3 out of 8, and we got shut down. I had to hightail it. They told me 2 weeks, and I was like, I don't think that's the case. So I grabbed all of my stuff out of the apartment where I was staying, where I was supposed to be through May, came back here to be with my family. And I feel there's no slowdown. If anything, there's even an uptick in work, because I have all these other kind of this whole connection project of my own on the side, where I'm trying to, same as you, just put out, somehow inspire people and put out some positivity in the world. So I actually feel like very busy right now. And to answer your question, the general gist of it is the same. The same purpose as my podcast, which is just to encourage people when they get knocked down. And right now it feels like the whole world is knocked down a little bit. So I'm proofreading my book for the last time before the publisher gets it, and it's totally out of my hands. And that's actually due later today. And as I've gone back and read through it, I've been pleasantly surprised. There's part of me that worried I would cringe when I saw it again. I'm actually liking it, and strangely, it's feeling very, very, very appropriate in these times. It's all about the uncertainty that I faced as an actor, and right now I feel like the whole world is kind of unfortunately brought into my world of not knowing what's next. That's what I've been living with forever.
No, I have to tell you that I love your podcast and the concept of what it is. I think obviously there's a lot of overlap in regards to what we're doing here at No Quit Living. And you said something that was interesting is it's about getting knocked down, and then you followed up with, you feel like the whole world's got knocked down now. And I think that as mankind, what we need to do is we need to encourage each other, inspire each other, and we need to spread more positivity in today's day and age, ever so than we have in the past. And I had a guest on, I'm not sure if you're a big basketball guy or college basketball guy, but Jay Billis is a buddy of mine, and he was on a couple episodes ago, and he said something in the parting words. He said, we've gone through challenging times in the past, and he said, we will get through this, and we will get through other challenges. And I think that's the one thing that I've seen on social media and with a lot of great podcasts such as yours and others out there is, not focusing on just the fear, not focusing on all the negativity, which, there is nonstop with all these challenges and people getting sick. But it's I think taking a step further is how can we help each other, inspire each other. I think what you said before about the story about John, that's the epitome of when you get knocked down, and the Japanese proverbs is fall down 7, get up 8. I think the reality is, and in your world, the whole concept of being an actor, it's you get told no. If you get told no way more times than you get told yes. And I think some of the people that we've connected with, it's just been amazing. It's that whole concept of just continue to go and keep fighting even when your back's against the wall. Yeah.
I have something a section I just read the other day where I talk about this little thing that I call it willful denial, which is, the facts in front of you, certainly as an actor, they're screaming at you, just quit, just go away, go do something else, get a regular job that's going to pay you on a regular basis. Like it's just screaming at you all the time. And it's not denial in the sense of like not figuring out what the business is and knowing what it is that you're dealing with, and then, strategizing with that. But it's denial of those, I put them in quotes, facts, because those facts are just what you see right now. And it's the vision that you have in your head of where you're going to go. Other people just don't see it yet. That's how I look at it. So you're denying the reality that's right in front of you, and in favor of the vision that you have of what could be. And really, if you look at anybody in history who's made huge impact, that's what they've done. I mean, from a certain vantage point, all of the people that we look at and laud as our leaders and our innovators, they really were insane back in the day. Like they were talking about something that did not exist yet. I mean, you look at Steve Jobs, we're going to have a computer on every desk. Like, really? People are probably looking at him like he's crazy, but now we have computers in our pockets. That's what you have to, it's a willful denial, I think. And I think it applies to right now where we are. Yeah, the numbers don't look great, but you have to kind of manage the fear and stress and anxiety around it, put it in its place, and then carry on and do what you can to combat it rather than just let it freeze you and overwhelm you.
No, I think that was perfectly said, and I could not agree more. So I love the whole concept of your podcast and the title, and I was curious, how have you looked at or addressed failure in your professional career?
Well, the tagline on the podcast and on the back of the shirts that we sell from it are "Failure is opportunity." And that comes from my dad when I was growing up. My parents were not athletes, but, my brother, my sister and I were, my sister not as much, but my brother and I certainly were like rabid about sports. And as you and I talked, we went to went to high school in the same area. Shout out to John Jay High School. And when we would play, my dad would come to, they would all come to the games all the time. And my dad would always say, I don't know anything about sports, but I know about life. And he was really like a, very rah-rah. And he would always say, failure is just opportunity in disguise. And that's kind of always how I've looked at it. And that's really the cornerstone of the podcast is when setbacks come, they look like a setback, and you have to reframe and you have to find the silver lining. You have to. I mean, and people could say, oh, that's BS. You're looking with, through rose tinted glasses, and whatever you want to say. In my opinion, it's necessary. I mean, you have a choice. You're going to roll over and die, or you're going to look at it as a way to say, okay, how is life working for me right now? What is it that is shaking me up, stopping me dead in my tracks? Why is this happening, and what can I learn from it, and how can I pivot? And, everybody right now is being forced to think this way because it's happening on a global scale. But for an actor, this, fortunately / unfortunately, is my life. I mean, every time I go in for an audition, you can't help but, you want to go in with as much, confidence and positivity. So you prepare, but then what happens is you envision getting that role, and you can't help it. You kind of go down a path of like what your life would be like if you had this role. That might take you for 3 years. Who knows? And that's how you have to think, because you want to go in there and go, okay, I'm going to go in there. I'm going to, do this great job, and I'm going to get it. Most times you don't get it. And then what do you do with that? You have to you really got to just breathe, let it go, drop it, put it behind you, and look to the next one. And and what's funny is it's gotten easier to do with practice over the years, to the point where I'll have an audition that was really important to me, that I thought was everything. And I'm telling you, like a week or two later, sometimes I'll go through my inbox and I'll see the appointment email that originally came in, like, oh, you're going in for this project. And I'm like, wait, what was that one again? It's like, I don't even remember it. And you really, that's what you have to do. It's like in sports, if you throw up an air ball, if you think about that air ball for the rest of the game, you're done. you throw it up, you got to laugh, you got to shake it off, and you got to stay in the game and stay present. And it's just a law of nature. It's not me saying it. It just is what it is.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's like you said, it's reframing certain things and not to go on it, but we're clearly dealing with that from this global pandemic. And I think the reality is we are going to be okay, not only as a country, but as a world, but it's definitely challenging. And the question is, how do you continue to take these opportunities every single day? And I think you shared that quote by your father, and I think that's really important. And I think it reminds me of another quote by Zig Ziglar, where failure is an event, not a person. And I think that's something that people don't realize too and your career, I dabbled in acting for quite some time too. And I think not only do you get told no, but a lot of times you don't even get an answer in certain things when you're auditioning, and there's so many people. So I was joking with a friend of mine saying that in some ways it's almost worse because you don't even get a no. It's just like, all right, these 100 people audition, and the top 5 people that get called back sometimes only get contacted. So I think you've obviously reframed it, and I like that word a lot. Is it's about reframing what you go through, and the reality is, whether it's acting, whether it's sports, whether it's business, you have that next meeting, that next game, that next practice, that next audition, but are you able to reframe it for that positive? So you say, okay, you know what, this one didn't go well, but I got the next one coming up.
Yeah, and it's funny because sometimes you do that and you feel like you're crazy. You're like, oh my God, I'm just lying to myself. But this is what's cool about the book. I mean, I got to tell you, the podcast and the book, without realizing it, were such incredible therapy for me, because as I wrote the book, and this is what John said. So I started with the book and I explained it to John what I was going to do. And I said, I'm going to have all these guest quotes, and I've got all these amazing guests, and I'm going to talk about their stories. And he said, no, listen, this is your first book. This has to be your 10,000 no's. He's like, that's what people want to hook into. They want to hook into your story, and you can back it up with your guest quotes, but it's your story. And I think what happens is we feel unworthy. We feel like, well, who cares about my story? And so you want to shy away from it. But it leaning into it, I've realized as I wrote the book, I have so many stories of exactly what you're talking about, where I get booted from one job and I'm just totally depleted. And I'm thinking, okay, this is good. This happened for a reason. And you're saying that to yourself, but there's part of you that's like, oh, come on, man, this isn't happening for a reason. You just didn't get it. But there are, if you keep that attitude, all of the stories, they do end up having, because there's always the next gig. And there were, there's one, maybe the best one is when I was younger, I went in for this soap opera, and I never wanted to be on a soap opera, but I was bartending, and I'm like, I'd love a job that's a regular job. And I went in, I went really far. I went through all these things. I screen tested on their set in Brooklyn. It was like me and 2 other guys. I felt like I nailed it. I was like, oh, I'm going to get this. 2 days later, get the call. You didn't get it. And I'm just like, I've spent the last month going through the paces, thinking in my mind, convincing myself I'm going to have this paying gig, and it's just back to zero, back to bartending. But shortly thereafter, went in for another show, same thing, went through the paces, got really close. They told me I was the front runner. Then they brought in these big wigs. I thought, no way, I'm never going to get this. And I got it. And it was The Sopranos. And it's like, thank God I didn't get the soap opera and I got Sopranos, because it set me on a totally different course. So,
That's awesome. I just have to follow up with what one thing you said is you were very transparent, and I appreciate that with your vulnerability is, you get to a point, whether it's acting, whether it's sales, business, personal life, and you tell yourself it's okay and it happens for a reason, but you touched on the fact that it's not easy to do that. You don't get that job or sale, or, you don't get a call back. It's not easy to, sit in your car or the subway or walking home and just to say, okay, this happened for a reason. But I think to your point, it's what happens after that. And the reality is you could let that 15 minutes turn into 2 hours, turn into a day, turn into a week. And if and when you were not in that right frame of mind for the soprano audition, then the reality is not only would it have happened, that one, but maybe the next one you don't get because you haven't put yourself in that right frame of mind. So a couple of questions we ask, I actually want to change lanes here for each guest, is if you had to define yourself, but you could only use one word, what word would you pick?
That's a great question. Encouraging.
I love that. That's a fantastic word. Now, if I had the opportunity to grant you dinner with anybody, dead or alive, who would you pick?
Are you trying to set me up with my wife if I don't say her?
Well, the reality is you shouldn't say that your wife, because you should have dinners with her often. So
okay, so it's someone that I would never have the opportunity. Oh God, that's a great question too. Man, I hate these kind of questions. Totally stumped.
All right, that's good. See, I stumped you on one. So
you know what? You know why I'm stumped? I guess because I'm inspired by so many people. I don't know that there's one. It's a little bit like the way I would answer, like, what's my favorite movie? It depends what my goal is at the time. Like, what am I trying to lap? Am I trying to be inspired? There's so many people I'd sit down with, but honestly, I don't know that there's. I don't know that I don't know if I can answer that honestly.
No, that's a perfect answer. And you said something a minute ago that I want to follow up with is, I believe that social media, and we believe as a company, has the opportunity to inspire and positively impact others. And I was curious if there's anybody that you follow on social media that you find really inspiring.
Oh, there's so many. I mean, I feel very lucky that I happen to have met so many through my podcast that I follow, but John Gordon, definitely one of them. Again, depends on what you're following for, but there's guys like Bedros Keuilian and Jay Ferrugia, who are friends of mine that are in the fitness and entrepreneurial world and very, very positive. And this guy, Craig Ballantyne, who's helped me out a lot, who's very useful. He's got a lot of, then there's like, there's The Rock. You look at him and you just go like, here's this guy who's this, big superstar, and yet he's so accessible and friendly and kind of like, I know people, Richard Schiff I had on my show, and he's like, and Richard is can be a curmudgeon. And he was like, I got to tell you, Dwayne, he said, that guy is the real deal. He's like, he's not putting it on. He's like, he really is curious. He wants to get better at acting, and he really does care about people. He said, there's nothing bad to say about that guy. You look at someone like that and you go, that's just such a great example for so many people out there. There are more. I can't think of anybody right now, but there's tons.
No, I think that's the one thing that I've found with social media is you have the ability to follow people, to mute people, and I think it's really important, especially what we're going through today, is to make sure that you're seeing those type of people and those stories and those posts that are inspiring you and motivating you. Because you are a writer, I wanted to ask you if you're reading anything currently, or if you've read something recently that you'd like to recommend to our listeners.
I'll tell you a book I read last year called The One Thing, which is great. I read, I'm looking up on my shelf right now, like there's one that it's a tiny book, but the War of Art is great. Stephen Pressfield. So many. I've been reading more of those kind of the Big Leap, Gay Hendricks. Been reading kind of those types of books that are more self-development lately. Then I have, fiction, works of fiction. But there's so many. God, I'm realizing in this interview that I'm terrible at giving you a specific answer.
Well, the whole point of some of those questions open-ended is just like you answered the question that you asked yourself, is if you have to answer what's your favorite movie, it depends on what the objective is. And I think that was so interesting that you said that, because I have an all-time favorite movie, which is A Few Good Men, and I'm not sure if most people know, but you can actually break a DVD by watching it too many times, which I have done with A Few Good Men. But to your point, if I want to laugh and I'm in a mood for, I'm not going to pick up A Few Good Men. If you want a motivational story, you might pick up something like Rudy or something like that. So I think it's spot on. But wanted to ask you, and it's a very open-ended question before we get to that, is for our listeners that want to connect with you, follow you, or find out more about your podcast and your upcoming book, what's the best way for them to do so?
The thing I'm probably most active on right now is Instagram, and my handle there is at Matty Dell, MATTYDEL. And the podcast website is 10,000nos.com. That's 10000nos.com. You can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, all that stuff. It's just called 10,000 Nos with Matthew Del Negro. And it's the number 10,000 with a comma in there and quotes around the no. And the book is the same title. We're working on what the subtitle is going to be. That's coming through Wiley and Sons Publishers. It was supposed to be June 23rd, but with everything happening, my show that I'm working on, City on a Hill, is the Showtime show with Kevin Bacon that we were in the middle of shooting. That premiere is probably getting pushed. So I'm trying to line up the book to be closer to the premiere date of City on a Hill. So that might be the fall. Who knows right now? I mean, it just depends when we're, but if you follow me, you'll get plenty of news about all of this stuff.
Awesome. And then last question is, if you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners today.
Yeah, parting words, just kind of, which is, I love what you're doing, by the way. I'm really inspired by what you're doing. And that would be what I would have to say, which is whoever you are, whatever you do, don't be defined by your job, be defined by how you conduct yourself, and just ask yourself every day and every interaction you have with someone, are you leaving the world a better place than you found it, or the opposite? And in my opinion, hopefully you're going to choose to leave it a better place, whether that's in a tiny exchange with someone at Starbucks or it's in a grand scale, whether it's with your kids or your wife or whatever. Like, how can you contribute? How can you serve in some way and empower people and encourage them to bring out the best in themselves?
I love it. I think that is a perfect way to finish today's interview. So I definitely recommend our listeners to connect with you, follow you on social media, but also check out your podcast, because it's very similar in the concept of what we do here at No Quit Living. And I appreciate you sharing some time with us today.
Hey, man, thank you so much for having me, Chris. You asked great questions. Obviously, you stumped me. I'm a little embarrassed. You're going to have a lot of empty airtime in there if you don't edit it, but that's cool. I really, really appreciate you having me on.
Thank you for listening to episode number 253. I had a really fun conversation with Matt, and it's tough to miss the spirit and the way in which he encourages others. His podcast, 10,000 No's, is all about encouraging others. And I love his tagline, failure is an opportunity. It reminds me of one of my absolute favorite quotes by Zig Ziglar, where he says, failure is an event, not a person. Matt's parting words were spot on. He posed a question to us. In all of our interactions, do we leave the world a better place? I challenge you today, in all of your interactions, to have a positive impact and encourage other people. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.